Dark Souls 2 has an abundance of weapons to choose from, making many builds incredibly strong. However, what if I told you that one of the best builds I have ever used in the game is just your bare fists? With this setup, you have incredible DPS while not having to deal with upgrading a weapon, and it is honestly insane just how good is his. So to begin, we choose the Knight class and take the bonfire aesthetic, which is crucial for this build. We murder Moglin for his armor set and get some easy souls by cheesing Dragon Rider and then punching this woman off the ledge. We get these souls for the cat ring to drop down the well in Majula, as we are going straight to the Royal Rat Vanguard. And let me tell you, this boss is very humbling at level 1. It's still not difficult, just classic Dark Souls 2 stuff with multiple enemies, but not being able to one-shot these things and barely any healing makes this boss pretty scary. But afterwards we get the dagger from the tutorial to start the farm for the build. We use a bonfire aesthetic here and kill this invader a whopping 50 times for 50 awe stones, and then after like 45 minutes we join the Covenant and give all the awe stones one by one, which was very fun, and with the 50th one we will get the Vanquisher seal, which significantly increases fist damage, and I do mean significantly. And with all that farming we have a ton of souls to level up our character, and then we head down into the gutter. We punch the crap out of these giants to get the DLC key, then we test out the build on the Rotten and do pretty respectful damage, especially without the build being complete, and then before entering the DLC we take out the last giant, which is an absolute joke anyway, but never more so than with your bare hands. Now we go into the DLC and sprint past everything, getting a few bonfires for later on, but we are here for one thing and one thing only, the Flynn ring, which is insanely overpowered, especially in DS2. And from here the build is essentially complete, and now we are ready to beat up some bosses. We start off with the old Dragon Slayer, as this boss is one of the most annoying to get to with the amount of enemies to run past and with the dragon outside. We fight our way through and destroy the dragon in seconds. The old Dragon Slayer is actually a fun fight. It's got good combos and timings, however it's a shame we're not in the fight for that long with the DPS we have. And it was right here when I realised that I'm still in the Covenant of Champions, which I then also realised in said Covenant enemies do 50% more damage and I do 20% less, which, you know, isn't that great, which means all these prior bosses would have been even easier. But oh well, we had to make it a bit more of a challenge. But I then joined the Rat Covenant and now we're ready to deal even more damage. We then head to No Man's Wharf, and normally this area can be quite annoying with the spam. However, when you just punch everything once and they die, it's not as bad. We summon the ship and head into the boss fight. Well, try to anyway, but since Dark Souls 2 loves screwing the player all the time, without the iframes while we enter boss fog, we have to deal with the enemies chasing us, and then we are ready to fight the Flexo Sentry. And again, what can I say? I like the boss, but since we absolutely melt it, we only see 2 moves before it goes down. It's always great to have a really good build, but sometimes you do miss the engagement of the game since you don't get to spend a lot of time fighting things, which, don't get me wrong, is a very good problem to have, and hey, the less time you spend in this game the better, right? And from here we are gonna go through the Shaded Woods, getting the +1 Chloranthie ring, and making our way to fight Najka. And Najka can be a bit cheesy if she is allowed to use her magic or burrow underground. However, if you keep baiting her tail attacks, you have plenty of time to get a lot of hits in. After her, we just keep running through until we reach probably a top 5 boss in the game, Prowling Magus and Congregation. I think they are really underrated personally. I love how you have to control the crowd of random hollows, and with the 2 casters who heal them, and then Magus, how he does 2 moves the whole time, then you just smack him 3 times and he dies. It's a really engaging boss that I feel goes a bit under the radar. Anyway, after that masterpiece, we get a bonfire aesthetic, and normally we can collect a lot of upgrade materials, however the fist can't be leveled up, so we get to save time and not worry about any resources. We use the torch as the next boss is Duke's Dear Freya. Freya is cool visually, but a boring fight since we just bait out her laser beam attack, then run behind her and punch her butt face. Do this a few times and she goes down. We then head through the Lost Bastille to reach the next boss, the Ruined Sentinels, and although it's expected at this point, I still can't get over just how much damage you do. Like, it seems like such a random ring to be able to get, but how it completely breaks the game. Like, I've never used a weapon that even comes close to being this good in Dark Souls 2. We smack up the Ruined Sentinels with absolute ease, and then keep on progressing to punch some vertically challenged individuals, to then fight the Belfry Gargoyles, not to be confused with the much more enjoyable enjoyable and better designed bell gargoyles from DS1. However, thankfully again with this boss, depending on your weapon and how early you fight them, they can be a massive pain, but with the best build in the game, they are an absolute joke. From here, it's just a straight beeline to the Lost Sinner, and I forgot to light the torch here to make the arena brighter, but then I remembered how overpowered I am and completely forgot about it. Lost Sinner can be quite annoying, constantly jumping away and then instantly following up with an attack, especially with little to no stamina, but you can kinda circle strafe a lot of the attacks, which is all too common in the game. But after a while, the Lost Sinner goes down, and next up is not only one of the worst bosses in the game, but the worst rat boss, which is crazy since the Royal Rat Vanguard exists. With the Royal Rat Authority, you can deal with the toxic rats with a bow, but you know, we can't on this run, so we just have to hope and swing our way through and hope we can kill them. However, the main issue I found is the light attack does not hit them locked on, so we had to try and do heavy attacks on them one at a time while dealing with the Sith ripoff as well. Once we have dealt with the rats though, the boss gets infinitely easier. Just stay at wannabe Sith's back legs and punch him to death. Next up, we head to the Huntsman Copse to fight another 2 atrocious bosses. It really is insane how terrible the boss quality is in this game. We go straight to the Executioner's Chariot, where we just tank damage from the skeletons until we can kill the Necromancers. Then with the horse, the thing literally has half health before the fight even begins, and then we just take it down from there. We then kill another vertically challenged person for his armor, and head over to the Skeleton Lords. We use the same tactic as the Chariot, where we just try and swing through everything, not really caring about being hit, and it works surprisingly well, especially at this point with the levels invested. It's not even remotely a challenge. We just continue on this boss gauntlet as we come to the Covetous Demon. Jabba's cousin has always been a joke. He just musters all his energy into a few leaps, leaving ages between attacks, so we just wait for him to get tired and then we can punish. And then we head through to the next boss, not forgetting to set the steel beam on fire so the fight isn't trivialized. Shout out to Dark Souls 2 Lock On, and then we are ready for Mytha. She's another one of those pretty good fights that we don't get to enjoy that much since it's over in about 10 seconds. After that, we head up this elevator that's at the top of a broken tower in the sky and come out into a lava world. Never change Dark Souls 2. And we come to the most traumatizing section of a casual playthrough of this game, which is a pretty crowded list to get on, the Iron Keep. I love this area so very much. And it's even better having to deal with the invader every single time you die. It's just so fun. Thankfully we one-shot the enemies though, and then it's time for the Smelter Demon. This boss is one of the bright sparks in the game. The moveset is fun and fair, although I'm not a fan of taking fire damage just because you are close to him in the second phase. But it's a really good fight and not too much of a challenge with the fists. We go straight back down afterwards to kill the Pursuer for the +1 Ring of Blade to deal even more damage, and then we smash their heads against the wall trying to get through the rest of the area. Thank you Dark Souls 2. And now it's time for the old Iron King. He's a very tedious boss as we are just waiting for his attack and then hitting him during the downtime. We get good RNG, so no AoE attacks that always seem to launch you into the lava hole. Afterwards we go back to the gutter to use the bonfire ascetic so we can fight the Rotten again, because you can never have enough souls in this game, and to light the primal bonfire so we can speak to Aldea. We get a few more levels here and head through the Shrine of Winter to progress to Drangleic Castle. We sprint past everything, making our way to the Twin Dragon Rider boss. The classic Dark Souls 2 experience. You have a shit enemy and multiply them and give them a boss health bar. The archer dies in 2 hits and we use the good old circle strafe to deal with the other one. Then we activate the elevator and wait 2 hours on it coming down, and another 2 to go up it, and then we fight the Looking Glass Knight. We use a bright bug because, you know, we're kinda struggling for damage at this point, and then we can just keep to the left side waiting for the lightning attacks, and we can just walk to the left to dodge his swing, and then he is dead in a matter of seconds. And now we are at one of the best areas in the whole game, the Shrine of Amana. Now this area is torturous enough with a bow, but seeing as we don't have access to one, we have to think of a new strategy. And this is the most skilled and notorious method I like to call run for your life and hope you get to the next bonfire without being killed by the sheer spam of Dark Souls 2. This second section is a bit trickier as there are now caster enemies, because why wouldn't there be, of course. We use an alluring skull to no effect, and from here I decide screw it, I will just risk it. And of course, since the fog wall bullshit doesn't help, it goes horribly wrong. Attempt number 2 goes even worse. Attempt number 3, I try alluring skulls again for some reason, knowing that they don't work, but thankfully these guys were too far away, so we managed to get through. And after all the trauma of that, we will just sprint past all the next enemies until we reach the Demon of Song. This boss is easy enough. We just bait out an attack to expose his face, and then we get our hits in and rinse and repeat. Very simple. We make our way through the undead crypt, getting the shortcut for later on, and then run past the clump of enemies outside the boss room to take on Velstadt. He is one of the better bosses in the base game. He has fun combos, and although I think circle strafing is very boring, attacks like his poke, where you can move to the side, are really fun and add a bit of variety since we're not always rolling. And with our damage, he gets absolutely obliterated, and we don't even get to see phase 2. Then the plan was to fight Vendrick, but I then remembered to do even respectable damage, we need the giant soul. So we head to one of the memories. However, I then also realised we need the Ashen Mist Heart first from the ancient dragon. So we head over to Aldea's Keep and sprint past the trolls to fight the guardian dragon. This boss is very luck dependent. If it does a lot of melee attacks, it can be over quite quickly. Otherwise, it's just watching it show off its flying. Thankfully, we get a long attack so we could kill it before it had a chance to fly off. Afterwards, we zip on over to the Dragon Shrine, one of the coolest FromSoft areas they've made, and then try and sprint past everything, which is quite tricky as this is Dark Souls 2, meaning that there is at least 40 more enemies in an area than there has any right being. We get the Ashen Mist Heart and then fight the Ancient Dragon, or try to, but the enemies can come all the way over to this part for some reason, so we make our way back up, dodging everything once again. We make our way back up once again and can now fight the boss. Oh, and did I say fight? I mean tickle his toenails for ages while he just lets you until he dies from it. This is still one of the most disappointing bosses in the series. Next up, we have the giant memories to collect the giant souls. We just run through to the end to collect them in each, and then we go back to Vendrick, who is another disappointment. You can just circle strafe him since his wide swing doesn't even reach, and as long as you're moving around his side, his slams will never hit you either. What an amazing game this is. Next up is the Giant Lords. We wait for the fireballs to take out these other giants, and then we bait out the Giant Lord's slow attacks to punish. We get lucky with like 7 foot stomps in a row, so we take it out pretty easily. And with that, with the exception of the final bosses and Dark Lurker, we are done with base game and we're ready to head into the first DLC properly. We get the Eternal Sanctum key and have the most typical invader battle ever, and then we can make our way to fight probably the best DLC boss in the game, but to first reach it we have one of the best runbacks in the game as well, and trust me, there's more where that came from. The Grave Trio is such a thrill to fight. The constant running around the arena trying to isolate them is so fun, and it only takes like 15 minutes. Oh, you know what, I'm happy I died here because the boss is so fun. I want to be in the fight for even longer. And that's why I died again here, because I just couldn't wait to get back in there and start it all over again. For the last two here, I tried ambushing one, but Havel was always too close, and thankfully DS2 has life gems, because I don't think the game is beatable otherwise. And then for Havel, we bait out his bigger attacks and unsuccessfully try and stunlock him, so we just trade damage for the most part, but eventually he dies, and so too does my will in life. We then get the Dragon Egg to activate the temple to reach our next DLC boss, Elena. She's actually a pretty decent fight. Her summons can be quite annoying, but if you got this far in Dark Souls 2, you're probably used to it, and she has some fun melee and projectile moves to dodge, so overall is a very solid boss. Straight after is Sin the Slumbering Dragon. I don't really get the appeal of him, to be honest. I don't think it's an awful fight, but it's not really enjoyable either. It's another boss that is constantly elsewhere, where you can't really engage with the fight. When he is on the ground, you can kind of just stay at his hind legs and get a lot of damage in. So yeah, Sin is a cool looking boss, but not the most fun to actually fight. But with him is the end of the first DLC. Moving on to the next DLC, we have Alium Lois. Man, the quality of these DLCs compared to the base game is crazy. The unique designs of each and the level design is a real improvement. We make our way through to get the Eye of the Priestess so we can fight Ava. Ava is a really cool boss. It's a fun introduction, especially if you don't have the eye since she will be invisible, but the actual fight is solid. I wasn't doing as much damage as I thought, and the sweeping attack has strange timing, so I was getting messed up by it. But we get there in the the end and we head into the Grand Cathedral to remove the ice from the rest of the level. Then we take the different paths to rescue the knights that will help us with the final boss of the DLC. Again, another really cool feature, how it changes how the boss actually functions. And to keep up the very uncommon Dark Souls 2 praise, I never noticed this snowball before and seen the enemies down the hill, and a thought came to me to just try and hit it to see if anything happens. And alas, it rolls down the hill, getting bigger and bigger, taking out the enemies and creating a shortcut over the bridge. Absolutely amazing design, and probably the only time I've genuinely ever been impressed with Dark Souls 2. Hooray for Dark Souls 2. That praise is short-lived however, as next up on the agenda is the Frigid Outskirts. This is one of the only times I will genuinely consider not continuing on a playthrough. Dying here is the worst feeling ever, and having to do it multiple times is soul crushing. And boy did I die. It gets to the point where you just see the boss entrance, so you just have to try and avoid the ambush of lightning reindeers. Thankfully we get through, and after all that trauma, we get Ava ×2. This area will forever be terrible, but they could have at least tried to make an innovative boss for your efforts, or put a bonfire nearby at least. But no, this is Dark Souls 2 after all. After them we have the Burnt Ivory King. It has such a badass entrance, and the concept of you and your knights battling against the Chaos ones is very cool. The Ivory King himself is pretty good as well. He has a bit of a limited moveset, however it's still a fun fight, although a bit too easy at this point. As soon as he goes down, we end the DLC and we move on to the final one. The Broom Tower is another cool area, however I think it's a bit more spammy than the other DLCs. They all have their fair share of spam of course, but something about this one, probably the enemy types, are more unbearable. We get through the DLC until we get the Iron Scepter, which works like the ice from Alien Lois, where it opens up multiple ways to new areas and bosses. And the first boss on the chopping block is Smelter Demon, again. Oh wait, never mind, this guy is blue and has 0.7 times speed on 2 of his attacks, so it's a complete new fight. Paid DLC by the way. And to make it even better, they have another horrendous run back. It must be a fetish thing at this point for the FromSoft B team, because I don't know how anyone with a functioning brain thinks this shit is enjoyable in the slightest. Blue Smelter is fun, sure, just like the normal one is, but a joke being in a DLC. Thankfully, next up is arguably the best boss in the game, the Fume Knight. He looks so badass and has one of the most iconic swords in Souls. His moveset is great, and his unique attacks like his AoE are really cool and different to what we're used to in these games. It's very funny how inconsistent this game, but in particular these DLCs are, with a great boss, an okay boss, and then the worst boss you've ever seen. After Fume Knight though, we actually have another good boss, Sir Alone. To reach him, of course, there's another awful run back, you know the drill, and Sir Alone, although I think is a bit overrated as he is a bit too basic, it's a cool and fun fight, so there's nothing really bad to say. Sir Alone goes down, and with that is the end of the DLCs. We only have one boss before the final one, that being of course Dark Lurker. To reach him we need to access 3 separate portals around the world and light these things on fire in each. Also we have to kill every enemy in each level. It's a chore but not too bad thankfully, but once we've done all 3 we get to the boss. Dark Lurker is a good fight. Again, I think a bit overrated, especially with all the hoops and hurdles to reach it, but it is a fun fight, and the balance of both of them is really well done. Dark Lurker is a great fight, sadly over too soon for how long it takes to even reach it. And here we are ready for the final boss gauntlet, starting with the Throne Duo. We kinda just have to trade hits since there's not much time between the two of them attacking, however we do so much damage anyway so it really doesn't matter too much. And shout out Dark Souls 2 again, where you can't even hit the target, but we finish them off and get ready for Nishandra. She is a very lackluster final boss, having very basic combos. Her ability to make your character hollow is a cool touch, but if you just stay away and wait for her to be in melee range, it doesn't even matter. Plus, you know, with this build being the best in the game, yada yada yada, and that just leaves Aldia, a complete joke of a fight. He looks cool and some things are interesting, but he just does a projectile or something, then you can get an attack in for a very limited amount of time, and you do that over and over until he's dead. Not the greatest ending to the game, I must say, but after he goes down, that ends the Dark Souls 2 all bosses with only our fists, and boy was it shocking. I had no idea just how insane a build this could be with just a few rings and your bare hands. Thank you very much for watching, I appreciate you guys a lot, and with that I will see you in the next one.